Hi and welcome to the Financial Fox. Today I will be discussing the disruptive power of cryptocurrency for development with a special guest, John O'Connor from Input Output Hong Kong, one of the founding teams behind the Cardano blockchain. I'm sure everyone knows Cardano as it is one of the top 10 altcoins rated on CoinMarketCap. But I would like to highlight Cardano's focus on development, particularly for financial and economic inclusion. Cardano is built on a proof-of-stake algorithm and is known as the third generation of cryptocurrencies. It has evolved from scientific research by a highly skilled team of engineers and researchers. It was designed as a platform for financial transactions and applications, especially in developing economies. The brains behind Cardano is the company Input Output Hong Kong, led by Charles Hutchinson, also co-founder of Ethereum. Founded in 2015, IOHK is developing decentralized open source technologies that are able to cause cascading disruption. They are, I quote, committed to providing financial services to the 3 billion people who don't have them. Cardano has been at the forefront of blockchain technology in Africa, and John O'Connor is the director of the African operations, leading the first project in Ethiopia, where he's from obviously, and is now looking for new venture elsewhere in the region. Let me connect now to John. Hi John, how are you?
Doing very well, Stefania. Thank you for asking. How are you doing?
Yeah, all good, all good. Listen, before we go into the details of your African operation, I'd like to first explain the Cardano and the IOHK mission in developing markets. I mean, what opportunity do you see here?
Yeah, so I think that the starting point of that question has to be about what advantages does blockchain offer in a developing market or an African setting compared to what those opportunities look like within a Western setting. And I think that the answer here is really trust. If you look at the UK, we have hundreds of years worth of institutions evolving to solve the basic problem of trust. If you look at the land registry system within the UK, it has thousands of employees, and you can go and you can query who owns a piece of land for, I think, £6 or £7. Whilst this is expensive, whilst there are lots of overheads in terms of staff costs, in terms of that £7 fee which you have to pay, ultimately it does provide an accurate ledger of who owns which piece of property. If you look at Africa, then actually you're in a very different scenario. In Africa, trust is often at a premium, and if you look at the land registry question, you'll see that many of the African countries are all looking at how they can improve their land titling processes and their land registries. So blockchain offers the opportunity to be able to actually leapfrog over these hundreds of years worth of development and investment in infrastructure, which the West has had the benefit of, and to be able to solve the question of trust through this decentralized ledger. So I'll tell you a personal story is that my mother, who's Ethiopian, has been involved in a land case for 6 or 7 years now in Ethiopia. She inherited a property from her father who passed away, and the most bizarre set of events happened where the person who my grandfather had purchased a piece of land of went to bribe an official at the utilities company to be able to change the name on the registration, and then use that change to be able to go back to the courts and say, actually, I was never paid for this property, so I still own this piece of land. And this turned into a hugely lengthy and expensive court case. My mother had to prove the transfer of funds from my grandfather to the person she purchased the property of. And you've got to think about this, not just in terms of the net cost to the individual who's involved in this dispute, but to the government as well, who has to have their courts filled with cases of disputes over land. And it's not just even about the person and the government. It's about the impact that has from an investment perspective. If you're looking to get involved in Ethiopia and you want to start up a business, you have to have confidence that you own the things that you purchase and that you're going to be able to see the fruit of the rewards of your investment. So this is a hugely crucial question. And I think the blockchain has a big impact in terms of being able to solve the trust problem within many industries and not just land. But that's really what I think of it. This is a continent which has huge potential, with incredible demographic trends, and it could be an absolute powerhouse of the world's economy. But solving some of these basic questions of trust are crucial to that development. And that's why I think Africa is really a very, very important jurisdiction for blockchain.
Okay, let's go back to the project that you started in Ethiopia early this year, introducing blockchain into the agricultural supply chain. How is that going?
Yeah, so it's going very well in terms of the broader picture. So what we're doing is, at Cardano, what we're looking to do is to build a blockchain and build a permission ledger solution, which is probably more appropriate for supply chain questions that's fit for purpose, and which will allow really anyone to be able to deploy our technology in a supply chain setting. So, I've been in conversations with many, many, many people, and the appetite for this is huge. The World Food Programme is really interested in how they can optimize their supply chain through blockchain technology. The coffee example which you gave is just one example of that. So we've identified great partners here who really understand coffee on a worldwide setting, and very importantly, really understand it within Ethiopia and the specific problems which you have in Ethiopia, who are all on board and very interested to work with us. So I'd say you're probably looking at midpoint next year before the trial's rolling, but the broader picture of how we can get involved in solving supply chain questions is going well from an IOHK perspective.
Okay, that is great. So what you are basically saying that one of the reasons why you choose Ethiopia for this project, a part of your origins, is also because they do understand the advantages and the power of blockchain.
Yeah, I think that I'd say that the reception here has been really good. The government here is really focused on trying to use technology as an enabler for growth. And the Ministry of Science and Technology, who we signed a memorandum of understanding with earlier in the year, is very supportive in trying to promote the use of technology across other departments and government ministries, and also helping with the education process of that. So Ethiopia has been great from that perspective, but I think the real key reason why Ethiopia is such an interesting country is because of the demographics. This is a country of 106 million people, and it has low smartphone penetration, but the curve is exciting, and that change is exciting. If you can deploy solutions here across Ethiopia in the agri-tech space, or many others, healthcare, any of the other areas where blockchain looks very interesting, you have the potential to impact on the lives of over 100 million people, and that makes it very, very exciting from a company perspective.
Yeah, definitely. Now let's look at other countries. I mean, I know that you and your team have been recently visiting Rwanda, South Africa, Uganda, Kenya. Maybe can you tell us a bit more what is happening here and what are your plans for expansion?
Yes, of course. So whenever we look at the country, or whenever we go and we visit the country, the first thing that we really have to think about is how can we enable the local players to be able to take advantage of this technology and the assets which IOHK has. And every single country that we enter, there's different things which we can do, and there's different possibilities and different deals that can be done. I think that what we found in for instance, in South Africa is that we've sort of just hit this switch point where blockchain has become really interesting, and you've got a number of local players who are saying, we have a real business currently. We have an application which is enabling jobs in the informal sector, the type of job which might be a cement mixer being paid a very low daily wage to go and just mix the cements. So this is sort of bottom of the food chain within the building and the construction work. Having an application which allows people to be able to find people like that to come and to do one day's work without having to ask around, see who's available, to bring all of these processes of the job market into a centralized app. And this is it's a fantastic business. It's a fantastic application. The informal sector across Africa is a huge constituent of the economy. So by building an application which allows people to do the job discovery, find out how much they can get paid, and have a reputation management system associated with that, where you can find out how many other jobs as a cement mixer your cement mixer has done, and what the people who employed him thought about him, that's a great application. And what that application requires is a digital money, e-money component. They have digital wallets. They create these digital tokens to allow exchange to happen within the platform. But this is a significant burden, for a company which is a startup to go and create all of this. It takes a lot of tech hours, a lot of thought processes, and also creates a certain level of risk. They've essentially created a new currency. But how do people validate about whether or not this currency is legitimate, whether or not the company who's created it isn't creating money for themselves? These are all of the problems which cryptocurrencies have actually evolved to solve. So I think that there's a huge opportunity across all these countries to provide a solution where any startup, any company which wants to get involved in the hugely thriving emerging tech ecosystem across Africa can slot into our technology or some of the other players within the space and just bring in all of this functionality, bring in digital wallets, bring in electronic money, which can't be duplicated, bring in smart contracts. That really acts as a catalyst for any tech business within the African space, which has an electronic money component.
Yeah, that's really a big challenge. I mean, you started with a focus on agriculture, obviously, because that is probably the main, I would say, the main sector in Africa. Are you working into other areas at the moment, or which other sectors are you looking to get into?
So I think you really have to separate between the sort of the cryptocurrency implementation of digital wallet space and the permission ledger space. I think the permission ledger space is where some of the big applications, the big impact applications which involve governments, state players exist in. I've already mentioned the land titling and land registry question. I think that you've also got health records there. That's huge. Enabling people to have health records which are immutable, which can easily be accessed from any clinic or any doctor that you visit across a country without fees, without having to physically move the records. I think that this is a really interesting space, not just in Ethiopia but across Africa. I think that in addition to that, you're looking at business titling, really anything where there's a process. I feel that governments are now really becoming interested in asking the question, how can we improve this process? Yeah. How can we make it more auditable, more transparent, less amenable to corruption?
So that could be healthcare, that could be gaming, for instance, that could be any sector where, it could be, as you said, needs more transparency.
Absolutely. And, I think gaming has often been one of the industries which has led the first in terms of adoption of technology. It's not an industry that generates a lot of positive bylines across the press, but it is a ubiquitous industry across the world. So if you can take a gaming application, a lottery, a poker game, and you can prove that this game is fair, that no one's playing with the probabilities in order to be able to maximize the revenue for the company that's actually offering the game, that's a really interesting proposition. Blockchain offers that possibility. We can have provably fair games where you're playing a game of roulette on an online casino, and as the consumer that you're not being cheated by the person who owns the game. They're not messing on the server-side code in order to be able to maximize their profit. It's provably fair. Yeah. And that's a really interesting possibility. It's disintermediation with a direct consumer use case. And I think that's really important for the blockchain space. We need use cases.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the relationship you have with the government. I mean, we know the blockchain as a disruptive technology can create backlash from government bodies and also traditional authorities. What reaction have you had from governments, and what are their views? How are you managing these relationships?
So I think the way in which the adoption or the better to say the education process over what blockchain is and what value it can add to a country. It's not the same in every country, and more so than it not being the same in every country, it's not the same within every body within a single country's government. So I think that it's really important that education efforts happen, but that also has to go hand in hand with regulatory change within governments or within countries. I can give you a really simple example here, which is that the national bank within Ethiopia has a mandate for regulation over areas which within the UK would be very simple for you to start a company in. Here, you need direct permission from the national bank, and this is just the way it goes. This is an area of oversight within the economy which is restricted to people who have partnerships and relationships with this body. That just means that you have to look at other applications within this particular country. Within other countries, there's a very different evolution of regulation. So you can look at different types of projects. So if I was to say what's the right approach here, it's you have to be very flexible. You have to find out what are the problems that this country wants you to solve. I don't think that our role as a private company is to come in and start saying, this is the problem that this country should be looking at. You can say that your technology is applicable, but ultimately you have to be solving problems that people want you to solve. And that's really been my approach. Just listen.
Yeah, that's it. And picking up on education that you mentioned, I mean, blockchain is a relatively new concept, and the majority of people, even in developing countries, don't have much clarity on the topic. How are you educating people in developing countries to understand the use of technology? Because this is an important point. I mean, we know about the rapid technology take-up in Africa, but that really doesn't mean that people understand blockchain. How are you handling that?
I think that's a really great question, in that it really gets to the heart of what our role should be. I don't personally see our role as trying to educate individuals necessarily about blockchain. I do meetups wherever I go. I try to find if there's a local blockchain community and go and talk there and engage with the community. But when you do that, to a certain extent, you're already preaching to the converted. The people who are at the meetups, they're there because they want to talk about blockchain. So when you're talking about a wider educational perspective, I think that the way we should be doing this stuff is by working with partners. Yeah. Every country that I've been to has got a number of companies, a number of individuals who are incredibly excited about what the technology can do and are already doing this work. They're already engaging with individuals. They're already finding out what are the government bodies who are relevant to have these conversations with. And they're starting that process. So in the countries which you described earlier that I've been in recently, Uganda, Rwanda, South Africa, I've really been trying to find great local partners who are already engaged and really tuned into the local ecosystem, the local community, and trying to work through them. So that's the model, work with local partners.
Okay, finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about the competitive landscape. I mean, talking about your goal to enable an efficient system for digital payment to increase financial inclusion in Africa. We know there are already technology and competition. For instance, in the mobile payment market in Africa is currently dominated by M-Pesa, which has 30 million users worldwide. What can Cardano offer to African that is not provided by M-Pesa?
So I'm going to start by saying I love M-Pesa. I think it's been a transformative technology and it's been of incredible value. If you go through Kenya, every single person, any taxi driver, anyone will accept M-Pesa as a mechanism of payment. And this has been fantastic. This isn't a large reason, what's driven me to enter this space and to work in this role. So I absolutely am not going to denigrate M-Pesa's efforts whatsoever. It's been fantastic. That being said, M-Pesa is still a centralized prospect. It's run through the telecoms networks. Really what it is saying, I pay 100 birr for this right to use your phone network. well, that's sort of become like a currency then why don't we just trade these phone credits? And that's really what the origin of the M-Pesa story is. What we're trying to do is to build a provable stack where money is not duplicable. All of the benefits which you know about blockchain and cryptocurrency, to build this as a decentralized currency, which anyone can implement into their product, into their application, without costs. And then, and this is the big separation I find between what the traditional e-money and Pesa movements have done and what blockchain could offer, which is the smart contracts.
Yeah.
What you can do with the smart contracts, the possibilities are honestly unbelievable. If you were to think about the example I gave earlier of an application which is trying to take some of the jobs which happen in the informal economy and put them onto an application. Let's say that I'm the gardener who I talked about earlier, right? The cement mixer. And I have provably, on this application, it's all written on the blockchain, I provably performed work, earning a salary for myself every week, and that salary can be tracked. Let's say that I get to the end of the month and I'm short on my rent for the month. What can I do? Option one is I can go to maybe a local loan shark. Let's say we're talking about in South Africa and Tembisa in one of the townships. I could go to a local loan shark and he could charge me 100% interest rates a week. And if I can't pay for that, then I could end up in indentured servitude where he can demand that I work for him for the next 2 months. And that would be my law. Or else what I could do is to create a smart contract that says, I'm going to borrow 2 weeks of my wages. And out of the income which comes from me working on this app, I enshrine a smart contract on the blockchain, which means you automatically get paid a percentage of the money that comes in before I even have access to it. And I think that this is just the beginning of the tip of the iceberg. Some of the possibilities that come with the smart contract solutions are gonna, I think they're gonna change the face of our economy.
Okay, the final question, what are the challenges that you are facing in Africa?
I think that you really do have to be specific when it comes to this, and that every country has its own challenges and also its own opportunities. If I was to talk on a high level about the countries which I've been visiting and trying to develop opportunities in, I would say that some of the challenges are around like basic demographic and economic questions of what is the penetration of smartphones within this area that we're trying to disrupt it. You know, there's some amazing agri-tech ideas which I've heard, which will be amazing applications in 5 to 10 years time. But the smartphone penetration isn't yet there. If every farmer, smallholder farmer, who might be living on a subsistence level model, you know, just farming enough to be able to get by, maybe selling a little bit on the side, if they had access to cheap data and a smartphone, see some amazing applications coming out on the credit side, allowing them to be able to take part in the financial system. So I'd say that, you know, this demographic and the smartphone penetration question is probably the biggest question, the biggest factor across a lot of the countries that we're looking on. But I'm also incredibly positive by looking at the trends. These problems are solving themselves. We now have smartphones available for $30 to $40, which allow you to participate in the application ecosystem. So these changes are happening, and I'm very, very positive about the trend.
Okay, John, many thanks for your insight. I think was great, and I hope to see you soon in the studio for a face-to-face interview and knowing a little bit more on your project in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stefania.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye. Okay, this is everything from the Financial Fox. I see you next time.